بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. مطبوعات عزیز کشور و مطبوعات جهانی به شمول مهمانای امریکایی، بسیار خوش آمدین به پرس کنفرانس امروز ما با جناب محترم جان کری، وزیر محترم امور خارجه امریکا. آقای وزیر خارجه و ما از دیر زمان با هم آشنا هستیم، شناخت داریم و رابطه دوستی و رفاقت داریم. از دوستی اینا و رفاقتشان هم خوشحال هستیم، هم بو افتخار میکنیم. اینا همیشه از دوستدارای افغانستان بودن و در حالات مشکل روابط بین دو کشور اینا همیشه دست آشتی و جور آمدن داشتن با ما که طبعا به خیر روابط بین دو کشور انجامیده. امروز اگرچه سفر اول اینها به افغانستان نیست، چندمین سفرشان است، ولی سفر اولشان به صفت وزیر امور خارجه امریکاست و در این مقام جدیدشان هم برشان مبارک میگیم و هم اینا را خوش آمدید میگوییم به کشور ما. ما هیئت‌های ما و ملاقات تنهایی هم با هم داشتیم، صحبت بسیار مفصل در روابط بین دو کشور صورت گرفت. مسائل مورد علاقه دو کشور صحبت شد، نوسانات روابط ما صحبت شد، پایین‌ها و بالاهای روابط ما صحبت شد. امروز البته یک روز خوبه بود، به این معنا که انتقال زندان بگرام به حاکمیت ملی افغانستان صورت گرفت که از جانب افغانستان وزیر صاحب دفاع ملی کشور ما امضا کردند و در محفل دکتر صاحب اشرف غنی و وزیر صاحب عدلیه و دیگر بزرگای افغانستان تشریف داشتند که از کمک‌های کوشش‌های برادران ما در حکومت افغانستان در این راستا از جناب تشکر می‌کنیم بسیار زیاد و از جنرال دنفورد و سفیر امریکا که در مورد ایران کوشش کردن و کار کردن. بالاخره بعد از یک کوشش چندین ساله این توافق به ترتیب شد که انتقال زندان بگرام صورت بگیره و یک مسئله بسیار مهم برای افغانستان و مردم افغانستان است. حاکمیت ملی ما در اینجا به تمام معنا باید تمثیل شود و دیده شود. همچنین ما با هم به توافق رسیدیم که از ولسوالی نرخ میدان وردک قوت‌های خاص امریکا بیرون شوند و اونا در ترتیب کار گرفتن روزهای آینده بیرون میشن. وزارت دفاع ما و جنرال دنفوردی مورد دارن کوشش میکنن که وام خبر خوش و نیک است و تشکر میکنیم که اینا در این مورد اقدام میکنن، از ولسوالی نرخ میدان وردک بیرون میشن. این به سلسله انتقال و با پروسه انتقال کمک زیاد میکنه. ما به جناب ما وزیر امور خارجه امریکا در صحبت‌های خود اطمینان کامل دادم که دولت افغانستان، مردم افغانستان، قوت‌های امنیتی افغانستان به تمام معنا آمادگی دفاع از خاک و مردم خود دارند و پروسه انتقال یک امر به خیر مردم افغانستان و به خیر امریکا می‌دانیم و در کمک‌هایی که جانب امریکا به تقویت نیروهای افغانستان کردند، به تقویت اردوی ما و به تقویت پلیس ما کردند تشکر کردیم. از کمک‌های مردم امریکا به مردم افغانستان در بازسازی کشور ما تشکر کردیم. از رئیس جمهورشان و خود جناب وزیر امور خارجه امریکا تشکر کردیم با کمک‌هایی که به افغانستان کردند و به قوتی که او کمک‌ها به افغانستان آورده و از او افغانستان صاحب توان و مدیریت و قوتی شده که از حال تا به 2014 و بعد از 2014 افغانستان به تمام معنا توان دفاع خاک و مردم خود داره. صحبت مفصل همچنین در مورد پروسه صلح شد. افغانستان با دفتر تأسیس دفتر برای طالب ها برای پروسه صلح و برای مذاکرات صلح با شورای صلح افغانستان موافقت خود کرده و انشاءالله چند روز بعد سفر ما خواهد داشتم به قطر و در مورد صحبت های مفصل تری با والا حضرت امیر قطر و مقامات قطری خواهیم داشت. افغانستان کوشش عظیمی خود میکنه تا دفتر قطر و باز شدن دفتر قطر برای تحریک طالبان به خیر پروسه صلح، به خیر تقویت وحدت ملی افغانستان و به خیر امنیت و صلح دوامدار در کشور ما تمام شد. البته افغانستان از تمام دستاوردهایی که در 10 سال گذشته داشته با تمام توان خود دفاع میکنه و هیچ گونه برگشتی را در این مورد نمیپذیره و هیچ گونه برگشتی در این مورد نخواهد بود. افغانستان دستاوردهای خود نگاه میکنه، دستاوردهای خود پیشتر میبره و مملکت به طرف فرداهای آرامتر و با سعادتتر انشاءالله تعالی به پیش میبریم. در مورد پروسه انتخابات صحبت مفصل شد. ما و جناب محترم وزیر خارجه امریکا در انتخابات 2009 هم با هم صحبت بودیم و کار کردیم و یادآوری کردیم بارها به جانب دوستای خارجی ما به شمول امریکا که امیدواریم ما است که به هیچ عنوان تجربه انتخابات 2009 در افغانستان تکرار نشه و انتخاباتی را که در پیش روی داریم در 2014 به تمام معنا خوب و شفاف و افغانی و به دست افغانها دایر شده باشه و این انتخابات بر افغانستان مشروعیت جدید را ببخشه، رئیس جمهور جدید را انتخاب کنه و رئیس جمهور جدید از رای مردم افغانستان انتخاب شده باشه و رای مردم افغانستان احترام شود و در این مورد اینها هم البته تشویش های خود داشتن راجع به انتخابات و دیدهای خود داشتن راجع به انتخابات که ما در اون مورد با ایشان در توافق کامل هستیم که انتخابات ما از هر دید و از هر معنا شفاف و پاک و درست باشه، نه در او انتخابات مداخله از جانب حکومت افغانستان و یا سیاسیون افغانستان باشه و یا دستهای دیگه، نه در او انتخابات مداخله از بیرونی ها در افغانستان باشه، از جوانب کشورهای خارجی در افغانستان باشه. انتخابات کاملا از مردم افغانستان باشه. توافق داریم و امیدوار هستیم که با هم یک جای، البته در جایی که کمک جامعه جهانی لازم باشه، در این مورد کار شود. ما در مورد رابطه منطقه هم صحبت کردیم. افغانستان خواستار رابطه نیک و حسنه با منطقه است و آرزوی همسایگی نیک با منطقه را داره. در مورد همکاری استراتژیک میان افغانستان و امریکا صحبت بسیار مفصل صورت گرفت. افغانستان خواهان رابطه نیک و نزدیک با ایالات متحده امریکاست و دیگر کشورهای متحد ما هستند. البته افغانستان مستقل، افغانستان آزاد، افغانستان صاحب حاکمیت ملی، افغانستان که مردمش احترام شده باشند و منافعش احترام شده باشه و در نظر گرفته شده باشه. در این چوکات افغانستان به تمام معنا حاضر رابطه و ایجاد رابطه استراتژیک با امریکاست و افغانستان با قرارداد امنیتی که فعلا زیر کار است بین کشور ما، مردم افغانستان به دید مثبت می‌نگرند و دید مثبت مطمئن هستیم که ان شاءالله بالاخره در توافق که با هم میکنیم منعکس میشه و دور توافق منفعت افغانستان و جایگاه افغانستان در این منطقه و در جهان تثبیت شده به کمک جامعه جهانی می باشه. یک بار دیگر از جناب ما به ایشان، از دوست عزیز ما و رئیس جمهور امریکا و مردم امریکا به کمکی که به افغانستان کردند سپاسگزاری میکنیم، تشکر میکنیم و از اینکه امروز انتقال زندان بگرام به افغانستان شد و انتقال عمومی صلاحیت کامل لامنیتی به جانب افغانستان میشه تشکر میکنیم و بازم به جناب وزیر صاحب خارجه امریکا دوست عزیز ما تشکر میکنیم. خوش آمدید.
Mr. President, thank you very, very much for a very warm and generous welcome, as always. I'm honored to be here with you again. I remember you once gave me a remarkable tour of this building and told me the history, and it's a pleasure to be back here and share other important moments here with you, and I thank you for that. I also want to thank you for what I consider to be a very significant and very encompassing statement that you have just made. I think on behalf of the American people, we're grateful for your recognition of the contribution of Americans and the sacrifices, and we understand the sacrifices Afghans have made. And we want the vision that you have expressed. And I thank you for the strong commitments that you have made to these future steps. You and I have known each other for a while now, and we've worked well together, and I appreciate enormously our friendship. And I know that you share with me a sense that this next year could well be one of the most important in the modern history of Afghanistan. Mr. President, you, I think, stand on the brink of a remarkable legacy for having brought Afghanistan through an amazingly difficult time. There are still difficulties ahead. There are still challenges. But what you have committed to in the context of this election is historic. And if we can work together, which I know we will, in the ways that you've described, I believe that the roadmap ahead is going to be very, very clear and very constructive. As I told President Karzai in our meeting just now, the United States is committed to an enduring partnership with the Afghan people as they seek a secure and democratic nation. And while none of us have any illusions about difficult hurdles to get over, we mean it when we say that as Afghans stand up and take control of their country's future, they will not stand alone. America will stand with them. And Mr. President, I can say to you that the United States supports a strong and a united Afghanistan that secures its rightful place in the community of nations over the course of these next years. Today, Afghanistan is managing three very significant transitions: a security transition, a political transition, and an economic transition. And America will continue to support the Afghan people through all three of these transitions, just as we agreed to do in the Strategic Partnership Agreement and in the bilateral security agreement that we are currently negotiating. We also support the Afghan-led peace process, the reconciliation, recognizing that the reconciliation is the best way to try to provide the surest end to violence and to secure a unified and a sovereign Afghanistan. So I appreciate that President Karzai has committed himself again tonight to the initiative in Doha, and that he will personally travel there for bilateral discussions with the government of Doha with respect to many issues. We continue to join with President Karzai in calling on the Taliban to join a political process, to renounce the violence and join in a political process, including taking steps to open the office in Doha along the terms that have been discussed to this day. Now, President Obama has not yet announced the number of troops that will remain past the 2014 date. But President Obama made it clear in his State of the Union message that we are committed to Afghanistan's sovereignty, and we will not let al-Qaeda or the Taliban shake that commitment. The Afghan people ought to be proud that their security and their police force grow stronger and grow more capable by the day, including what the President referred to today with the transfer of the detention facility at Bagram. That is an appropriate restatement of America's commitment to the independent sovereignty of Afghanistan. Now, this is the kind of progress that we believe will allow the United States and coalition troops to transition past the 2014 mission of training and advising. But as President Obama has made crystal clear, you can count on our strong support throughout the course of this new role and this transition process. It is key that these security gains will be a lot less meaningful if they are not matched, as you have discussed with me tonight, by good elections as well as by political progress and transformation. So let me say tonight that we welcome the Afghan commitment, which is a reflection of the Afghan people's desire to conduct a credible, safe, secure, all-inclusive, and transparent and accountable election. And I am very grateful for the President's comments tonight. We discussed ways this evening, and we will discuss more about how that can be carried out in the most effective manner. And we are certainly committed, together with the international community, to help Afghanistan have an election that the President has said will be beyond anybody's questions. We all know that democracy is never easy, particularly when it's young, but even when it's older, we still know it is never easy. It's our hope that this election is going to be a unifying moment for Afghanistan, and that it will represent, in a sense, the crowning achievement of the President's vision for Afghanistan when he peacefully transfers power to a newly elected president by the people of the country that you love, Mr. President. And we all look forward to that process, working together to effect it. President Karzai tonight could not have made more clear his commitment in a number of ways to trying to help guarantee that process. The third transition is the economic one. And the economic transition will ensure that the security transition and the political transition can both succeed. Reforms, we all know, are still necessary in order to achieve that, and in order to integrate the Afghan economy with the broader region's economy. But President Karzai has again restated his commitment to effect those kinds of reforms and continue to work with everybody in an effort to achieve that. So there is really much, as we talk about all of these things, Mr. President, I think there's an important story that doesn't get told enough. And that is how much the Afghan people can be proud of their sovereign accomplishments at this moment in time. As you know, Mr. President, I've been here many times. This is the first, as you mentioned, that I'm here as Secretary of State. And I can already see and feel the differences that are taking place. We are standing in Kabul in the fifth fastest growing city in the entire world. In the last decade, the GDP of Afghanistan has nearly quintupled. Health facilities like hospitals have quadrupled. Access to electricity has tripled. Life expectancy is up 50%. A recent United Nations report showed that Afghanistan has made faster gains in human development over the last 10 years than any other country in the world. And while fewer women are dying in childbirth, more of them have been elected to Parliament, and more of their children, especially their daughters, are going to school. And the President shared with me that his son just attended his second day in one of those schools. Many more Afghans are connected through the air and on the ground with access to technologies like cell phones rising. And incredibly, more roads have been built in the past 10 years than in the entire previous history of this country. So we all know there's a lot of work yet to do, but with each of these steps, Afghanistan is moving closer to self-governing, to self-determination, self-reliance, while undermining the violent extremists who offer nothing to compare with what has been achieved over these last years. So I am very, very grateful for the personal friendship that I share with President Karzai. The United States and President Obama wants me to convey to you how proud he is of the friendship between our countries and of the efforts that our citizens have made to join with you to help your country reach this great vision. I am invested personally, Mr. President, as you know, in the success of the people and of the government of this country, and I look forward to working with you to continue to do that. We will be continuing this discussion over dinner tonight. The President has asked me to spend perhaps another hour with him in the course of either the morning or tonight, and we will do that to discuss broader security issues and other challenges with respect to this country and the region. So I look forward to those meetings, and I'm very grateful to you, Mr. President, for your warm and generous welcome, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, Mr. President. President Karzai, after all of the American and Afghan sacrifices over these years, but after all of the American sacrifices, do you stand by your statement, your recent statement, that the United States is conspiring with the Taliban on recent terror attacks? And if I could ask Mr. Secretary whether you raised that issue and whether you got a response. And secondly, on this historic day of the transfer of the detention center at Bagram, let me ask you, Mr. Secretary, first, does the United States still have prisoners in Afghanistan, and if so, how many? And does the United States have veto power over any release of the dangerous prisoners that have now been turned over to Afghan custody? And if I could get President Karzai on that as well.
Go ahead. Let me just say very quickly that with respect to Bagram, we have worked out a complete arrangements. General Dunford is here. He is absolutely confident, as is the President of the United States, that in this arrangement, the sovereignty of Afghanistan is fully protected, but that President Karzai agrees there are certain people there who shouldn't necessarily be out, creating problems. And so we're very comfortable that the sovereignty is fully protected and the interests of the United States with respect to prisoners are fully protected. There's great confidence about that, or this would not have occurred. And we have protected, most importantly, the sovereignty of Afghanistan, which we believe, as does the President, is essential to this transitional process. So I think we found an appropriate way to accomplish both of our goals, and the answer is the United States, as of today, we don't have prisoners. Whatever is occurring here is under the control of the Afghan people, and the United States will cooperate with the government of Afghanistan. And we're satisfied that our interests are protected. With respect to the statement on that, yeah, we talked about that, and I think the President would be the first to say that sometimes in public, a statement is made that is a reflection of something that you've heard or some input that you have that reflects a point of view, but I'm confident that the President absolutely does not believe the United States has any interest except to see the Taliban come to the table to make peace, and that we are completely cooperative with the government of Afghanistan with respect to the protection of their interests and their people, and our efforts to continue to help their army to be able to deal with extreme terrorists who are still trying to kill people in Afghanistan. So the answer is we're on the same page. I don't think there's any disagreement between us, and I'm very, very comfortable with the President's explanation.
Ma'am, you're referring to my words, please ma'am, please, to my words during the International Women's Day conference, I believe, where I said that when we were in the United States, the US government told us that they will not be fighting the Taliban anymore, especially after 2014. And that while saying that, then US forces go to Afghans' homes at night or go to universities and arrest students. We agree very much. Actually, this has been our demand for years, that the war on terror is not in the Afghan villages or Afghan homes, that it is in the sanctuaries outside of Afghanistan. So we wanted a change in operations and tactics. And I'm glad to see that the change is taking place, and we have seen a difference in this regard. So we agree with the United States bringing to an end the war with the Taliban. We much prefer a peace process rather than to fighting. Therefore, we are in full agreement in support of this statement of the United States that the war with the Taliban will come to an end. Rather, we'll be happier if it comes to an end today. This was the first part of my statement. The second part was in response to the Taliban's suicide bombing in front of the Ministry of Defense in Kabul, the day Secretary Hagel, another good friend of mine for years, was visiting Kabul, where the Taliban said they blew the bomb, killed people in order to show their force to the US Secretary of Defense. And I said, how do you, the Taliban, show your power to the US Defense Minister or Secretary of Defense by killing Afghans, by killing a widowed woman, by killing children, by killing innocent bypassers? This is no show of force to the US Defense Secretary, but actually this helps the psychological environment of telling the Afghan people, well, if the US is not here, we are a threat to you. Now, the media took that to say that I said there is a collusion. I never used the word collusion between the Taliban and the US, and those were not my words. Those were the views picked up by the media. And I would repeat my word today to the Taliban, that if they want the international community to leave Afghanistan, then the best way for them is to stop killing people. That if they want the international community to leave this country, their forces, then they must stop hurting Afghans or hurting the international community. To the United States, I'm in full support of saying that they no longer want to fight the Taliban, that they will concentrate on fighting Al-Qaeda and the terrorist networks. And therefore, the peace process is the most important process here for us. That's what I've said. And that does not mean a collusion between the United States and the Taliban. That's the conclusion that the press came up with.
Mr. President, could you comment on whether or not you will consult the United States before releasing whatever high value, very dangerous prisoners that are now in your custody?
There are elements that the United States believe are of a somehow more permanent threat to Afghan forces and to the United States and other coalition forces that are in Bagram prison, which was transferred to Afghan authority today. In that regard, we have agreed two mechanisms. Mechanism one, that the United States will, through intelligence sharing in writing, inform the Afghan intelligence service of the information, of the intelligence they have with regard to a particular person that is considered an enduring security threat. I believe that's what it's called, EST, yes? EST. That's considered an enduring security threat. And once that is taken up by the Afghan body, there is a review board by the Afghan review board, and if the Afghan review board considers that this particular person, the EST person, is not a threat by the information that we have locally and internationally, then the last part of that process is a consultation, rather not a consultation, I must correct this, an exchange of views, between the U.S. commander in Afghanistan, in this case today it's General Dunford, and the Afghan Minister of Defense, who today is General Bismillah Khan. So there will be a consultation between the General Dunford and General Bismillah Khan, or an exchange of views. I must use my words carefully. An exchange of views, and of course, we will be considerate. We have written in the document that we will consider. So on good ground and confirmed information about an individual that's a threat to us, definitely the Afghan laws has a procedure for that, and under Afghan laws, we will keep such a person in custody.
Mr. President, what kind of leverage do you bring when you go to Doha to get the Taliban to the table? They've repeatedly said they won't talk to you. Do you feel that something has changed that will bring them to the table? Mr. President and Mr. Kerry, what happens if the Taliban won't come to the negotiating table? What does that mean moving forward?
What does that mean for what?
Moving forward.
Ma'am, we know the Taliban want to talk to the Afghan Peace Council and the Afghan government. They're talking to us already. There are individual contacts. When we say peace process, this is not to mean talking to the Taliban alone, unofficially, or as Afghan to Afghan, but a process whereby there is a recognized, official, publicly announced process between the Taliban and the Afghan Peace Council on the one hand, and between the Afghan government and the Pakistani government on the other hand. Without the participation of Pakistan, any peace process will not see a fruitful end. The other element in here is the United States and Afghanistan engaged with Pakistan and engaged with the Taliban. So the office in Qatar is something that we've agreed to. We want to encourage those who come to Qatar on behalf of the Taliban to begin to talk with the Afghan Peace Council as soon as possible. Now, the Taliban as Afghans, ma'am, have all the right to engage with all other Afghans as fellow citizens. That they can do today, that they can do tomorrow. Like they talk to me as a fellow citizen of Afghanistan, they also have the right to engage with all other Afghans in the same manner.
I think the President has answered the question fundamentally, but I'd just say to the Taliban that the President of the United States has made it clear that the United States of America is committed beyond 2014 to the government of Afghanistan into this legitimate democratic political process. The Taliban can choose to be part of that, and they know how, or if they're on the outside, continuing to be violent, I believe the people of Afghanistan, as they did the other day in Kandahar, will rise up and say, we're not going to tolerate this. But they should, in their calculation about whether or not to be part of this process, remember that the President of the United States has not yet announced what the future force levels will be, and he has committed to not allow, and he has used words close to this, not allowed America's investment and the sacrifice here to be reversed. And so I think the Taliban hopefully will understand that peace and peace talks are the best way to resolve the differences and engage in the political process rather than choose a road of violence. As I said today, the Afghan military has gained enormous capacity. Within a short period of time, there'll be an enormously important transition that will take place, a milestone this year, where the Afghans will be leading with respect to security. But the United States will still be playing a role and will be here over the course of this future period. And the President has pledged to continue to support Afghanistan into the future.
Thank you. Mr. President, you have clarified your remarks and indicated that you were misinterpreted by the media in the comments that were said about collusion. But there have been other things you've said, such as implying that U.S. Special Forces were somehow involved in allowing those abuses to take place in Wardak province that were alleged. So I want to know, with these statements that you make, aren't you worried that if you continue to offend your main ally by accusing the U.S. of such participation or bad actions, which has caused a lot of disbelief and anger in Washington, will you lose support from your main military and economic ally? And then also, you're going to Qatar, but what gives you faith that the Taliban are actually ready to renounce violence, cut ties with al-Qaeda, and respect the rights of women and minorities as stated in the Constitution? And for you, Secretary Kerry, given how difficult the negotiations over the detainee handover have been, what gives you confidence that the bilateral security agreement can be reached that would allow U.S. forces to stay beyond 2014? Thank you.
On the special forces and Wardak, ma'am, we received complaints from citizens of Wardak, residents of Wardak, about 6 months ago, that certain forces employed by the special forces were very heavy-handed with the local population. We investigated that. We found out that there was a person called Zikriya, an Afghan name, who apparently is an Afghan American, hailing originally from Kandahar province, who was part of this force and who, together with his team in Wardak, was violating the rights of the Afghan people massively. And we took up this issue with the special forces, with the military. At that time, General Allen was here in charge. We investigated. Much of what was said turned out to be true, on evidence, that this man and the militias with him were abusing the rights of the Afghan people, torture, including killing. And we used all other ways to correct the situation. But then, in the past 5-6 weeks, we received more complaints of a student who was taken out of his home at night, and 2 days later, his dead body was found under a bridge. And the local people said this was done by the special forces. We took up the issue, and we launched our investigation. The U.S. government did its own part. Now, when I say something publicly to this effect, this is not meant to offend our allies, but to correct a situation. I'm responsible for the protection of the Afghan people. I'm the president of this country. It's my job to provide all the protection I can to the citizens of this country, just like it is the job of the U.S. President, President Obama, to provide all the protection he can to the American people. And when he speaks for the protection of American people, he is not speaking against any other country or any other people. He's speaking for the American people. Here, I'm speaking for the protection of the Afghan people and for the respect of the rights of the Afghan people. I'm happy today that there is an agreement that the special forces from NERC will withdraw, and that the local forces with them will also withdraw, not the local police, by the way. There is a difference between the local police and the forces employed there. So, but we as Afghans must try our best to provide the protection to the Afghan people. I would like to add one more thing, ma'am. The Afghan people have suffered the most of all nations towards the end of 20th century and in the past 10 years. We as a people deserve better security, more respect. The slightest consciousness in us will not allow us to be looking the other way. Therefore, it is not to offend our allies or to score points. No, it's none of that. It's to correct the situation in the benefit of all of us, for our allies and for the security and well-being of the Afghan people. While the partnership continues, of course, it does not hurt that. It's not intended to hurt that.
The Taliban being ready, Mr. President, President Karzai, the part about the Taliban being ready to renounce violence and.
Was that addressed to me or to?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right? Yeah. Well, it's in their interest to renounce violence. It's in their interest to stop killing their fellow citizens. It's in their interest to stop hurting the security forces of the international community. It's good for them to come back to their own homeland and to raise their families and children and to have a better standard of living. It's good for them. This country is moving forward, as Secretary Kerry said moments ago. This country will not reverse. It will not be allowed to reverse in any manner. Therefore, and as I remarked during my last trip to America in Georgetown University, we have gathered a critical mass here. And that critical mass is serving as, do you call it a snowball?
Snowball? Catalyst?
A snowball is moving down from with a heavy snowball down the mountain. And whatever comes across it will sweep it away. So the Taliban better distance themselves from the path of the snowball and rather become what is a fickle of snow called? Snowflake. They must become a snowflake and join the snowball and have a better future in this country.
January, President Obama announced that we are committed to resolving and achieving a bilateral security agreement as rapidly as possible. And everybody understands that it is critical to the United States of America to have the same standard, the same protection in that agreement that we have everywhere else in the world. In every country where there are American troops, there's a certain jurisdiction that is appropriate to be reserved to the United States of America. Now, that has to be done, as we all know, and as General Dunford and all of his commanders work very hard to do, to live up to the highest standards and to respect the sovereignty of the country. And I am absolutely confident, based on the conversation we had earlier this evening, that President Karzai is committed to seeing that we achieve that agreement, and I am absolutely confident that we will, based on the conversation we had.
Since, as you know, the negotiation about the security agreement between Kabul and Washington is still going on, and if a foreign country attack on Afghanistan, so does the United States of America will defend Afghanistan, and are they ready to defend in Afghanistan? رئیس صاحب تاسو نن پوښتنه دوه برخې لري که څه هم نړیوالې ټولنې او په خاصه توګه د امریکا متحده ایالاتو د سولې پروسې خپل ملاتړ اعلان کړی خو هغه څنګه چې لازمه وه په دغه پروسه کې پرمختګ نه ده شوی ستاسو له نظره اصلي او جدي ستونزې په دې برخه کې څه دي او بله د قطر د پروسې لپاره طالبانو یو مهم شرط و چې هلته باید د دوی زندانیان خوشي شي آیا په دې هم تاسو خبرې کړي هلته به په دې باره کې هم تاسو خبرې کوئ چې د هغوی بندیان چې د دوی یو مهم شرط خوشي کیږي او که نه مننه
With respect to the bilateral agreement and the question you asked about defending, let me just be very, very clear. I said tonight that President Obama's commitment is that he's not going to allow the gains to be reversed. And in the bilateral security agreement, as well as in the partnership, the security partnership that's already been created, we've made certain commitments to Afghanistan. We are helping Afghanistan to have the ability to defend itself. Afghanistan will have one of the largest armies in the region, 352,000 troops. And Afghanistan is going to have an extraordinary ability, already proven, because now already Afghans are in the lead on most of the operations. And this year, within a matter of months, Afghans will be in the lead on all the operations. So Afghanistan is proving its capacity right now that it can and will defend itself. Now, we will work with Afghanistan to make sure that there is a regional understanding and a peaceful process here by which the integrity and the sovereignty of each nation is respected, and that is very important. So I believe that the security of Afghanistan is growing and will grow over the course of the next 2 years, and I have confidence that in the bilateral security agreement we will have a full understanding of exactly how that will occur.
د صلح د پروسې په باب سیده چې کار ډېر قرار روان دی او په هغه مواردو کې چې زموږ او د پاکستان د همکاري سخت ضرورت دی متاسفانه نه ده سوې که ستاسو په یاد وي قرار دا و چې په کابل کې د علماو یو مجلس جوړ شي د دواړو هیوادو د افغانستان او پاکستان او د دې د برابرولو دپاره د افغانستان هیئت د محترم مولوي صاحب کشاف په مشرۍ ولاړې پاکستان ته هلته د پاکستاني هیئت سره مذاکرې وکړې د هغو هیئت مشر مولانا اشرفي صاحب و خو هغوی دا غوښتل چې طالبان دي د علماو په دغه غونډه کې چې په کابل کې جوړه شي شرکت وکړي موږ ورسره موافق وو موږ اعلان هم وکړي چې خدای دې راولي طالبان په دې غونډه کې دې ګډون وکړي په کابل کې او بیا څو شپې وروسته مولانا اشرفي صاحب اعلان وکړي چې افغانستان کې خارجیان دي او دلته جهاد روا دی او انتحاریان دي پر افغانانو وسي نو دا ښیي چې دا یو مشکله معامله ده او هغه رقم همکاري چې باید وي نه کېږي خو د سولې پروسه د افغانانو یو اساسي ضرورت دی او د پاکستان یو اساسي ضرورت دی موږ یوازې د افغانستان په باب نن خبر نه کوو موږ د پاکستان په باب هم تشویش لرو په پاکستان کې تلفات تر افغانستان ډېر دي متاسفانه موږ په خوا بدي چې هلته دا تلفات شته او هغه هم خپل وجود او خپل ورونه ګڼو نو یو وارې بیا نه یوازې پر طالبان بلکې د پاکستان پر حکومت را کوم چې موقع دې د لاسه نور کوي او په دې امید نه کښېني چې سبا به دوی ته بهتره موقع بلکې ورځ په ورځ افغانستان ضرور کېږي ورځ په ورځ تقویه کېږي او افغانستان د پاکستان سره وروري او دوستي غواړي. هیله مې دا ده چې پاکستان هم د یو پیاوړي افغانستان سره د دوستۍ اراده وکړي او دا به یې په ګټه وي. بالکل موږ طرفدار یو، موږ په هم په دې کې طرفدار یو. موږ د ګوانتانامو د زندان څخه د طالبانو د خوشي کېدو حمایه کوو او کړې مو ده او دا حمایه مو حتی 2 کاله دمخه هم امریکې ته او هم ملل متحد ته ابلاغ کړی ده. اوس هم حمایه کوو. Should we call it ends? Yeah. تشکر. باز دیگه میگن یار زنده صحبت باقی باز میبینیم.